Breaking down a Common Core standard. Understanding the fundamental steps towards backward planning. What is a standard? In 2009, a bunch of educators, teachers, administrators, and experts came together and said, there's really no consistency from one state to another in the students' learning outcomes. As a matter of fact, the country as a whole is falling behind internationally in academics. So what are we going to do? They came together and developed Common Core standards based on research and evidence. They made them clear, understandable, and consistent. They aligned them with college and career expectations. They based them on rigorous content application and knowledge. And they took standards that other countries were using and implemented them. So standards primarily affect four aspects of education. First, they affect students, like what content do they need to learn and what skills do they need to develop. They affect teachers by helping the teachers understand what content they need to teach and what skills they need to help foster in their students. They affect curriculum because it helps make content relevant to the students, and it helps provide vertical alignment from one grade to the next by making a clear flow of learning outcomes for the students from K all the way to 12. For English language arts in kindergarten, there are 6 main categories for ELA Common Core standards. There's reading literature, reading informational texts, reading foundational skills, writing, speaking and listening, and language skills. Take notice that 3 of the 6 ELA Common Core standard categories are reading categories. That means that literacy is really at the core of education. And as kindergarten teachers, we are setting a foundation for the rest of these students' education. Some examples of standards from those categories are as follows. I took the first Common Core standard from the reading literacy category, and I took the second one from the reading fundamentals category. I just want you to see the difference between the two categories and what they're about. The first one is going to be dealing primarily with analyzing a text and by looking at the context of the details in that text. So, like, who are the characters in the story? What is the story about? What is the context of that story? What is going on in the story? So let's read it. With prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in a text. Very simple. The second one is dealing with how do students learn how to read. Let's look. Follow words from left to right, top to bottom, and page by page. So it's dealing with the mechanics of how students begin the process of learning to read text on a page. So how do we break down a standard? There are 2 primary questions that I ask myself before I start the process. The first one is, what skills do they need to demonstrate mastery of this standard? I first start with the verbs in the standard to help me to answer this question. The second question is, what material or content do students need to use to demonstrate mastery of the standard? And in that, I will use the nouns in the Common Core standard to help me to answer that question. So let's take a look at it and see how we do this. With prompting and support, ask and answer questions about key details in a text. So what are the skills? Answer number 1. Ask questions and answer questions. Those are the skills that the students need to be able to develop in order to master this specific standard. And number 2, what material or content do the students need to learn? Ask and answer questions about key details in a text. So they need to ask and answer questions about what? About a text. But what specifically about a text? About key details in a text. So this green part that I've highlighted here is going to be the answer to the question, the second question. But there's even further context provided by this specific standard. It says, with prompting and support. What does that mean? That helps us to determine what level of mastery that the students need to be able to demonstrate to show that they've learned this specific standard. So if the students can't do it without prompting and support, that's okay. They've still mastered it if they're able to ask and answer questions about key details in a text. Even though I'm helping them, it's okay. So what is it exactly? I need to clearly list out what the students need to be able to do and what I need to teach them. So let's look at these three things. First, students need to be able to ask questions about key details in a text. Second, they need to be able to answer questions about key details in a text. And number three, they need to be able to use target language and vocabulary that pertain to the key details in a text. Now, how did I come up with that one? Well, if the students don't have the vocabulary and the target language to actually talk about these key details, then they're not going to be able to ask or answer questions. So first, I need to teach them that so that they can develop the skills necessary to use that content. Big ideas. What is a big idea? Big ideas are usually questions or statements that are very concise and provide relevancy between content and the students. So, for example, I want to help the students learn the skills and the content necessary to accomplish that standard, but they need a context for it. So I use this big question: what do we do at school to help foster an environment where they can learn the skills that they need and make it relevant to them, make it relevant to their life? They're in school, they're new to school, they don't know what school is all about, and so I'm going to ask them this big question, and now they're like, well, yeah, what is school all about? I'm being separated from my mom for several hours in the day. Like, why am I here, and what do I do while I'm here? And helps them to think more deeply about what is this all about? Some assessments that I'm going to use to determine whether the students have learned and mastered the standard are as follows. I'm going to use pre-assessments first to determine what the students know and don't know. Do they already know the content that is needed to demonstrate mastery of the skill? That means, do they have the target language and the vocab to talk about the text? Or do they have the skills already? Can they already ask questions? Are they doing that in English? Are they answering questions in English with just one word or a sentence? I need to know so that I know which students I need to help and which students I need to push further. Formative assessments. At the end of the week, at the end of that, of all the activities that I do in class, I'm going to provide us a formative assessment to determine what needs to be done next. I'm going to test their speaking skills and listening skills to see where they are, to see if they can adequately perform more deeper activities that require critical thinking skills and creative thinking skills. And then I'm going to require them to demonstrate mastery in those areas with a summative assessment by making connections with their real life and providing cross-curricular activities that help them to learn math and social science and other aspects of content. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to first start with language acquisition. I want to provide them with a context for learning these things through extensive reading opportunities, role plays, and total physical response. That will help them to have fun while at the same time learning all of that and acquiring the language naturally. And once they acquire that language, I want to help them to produce it by speaking. So I'm going to do that with drills and games. And then finally, project-based learning. I want them to use all of that on a deeper level and start developing a global mindset and incorporate technology in their schoolwork.